Now let's talk about PPTP, the next type of VPN protocol that we have, point-to-point tunneling protocol. So I just explained to you why we need PPP, because when we have to send some computer traffic, some TCP/IP traffic over this serial line, we use PPP because PPP can then encapsulate or format the traffic in the right manner so that it can be understood so that it can be transmitted successfully over the serial line, right? But most of the times when the users make these connections, they're actually trying to go over the internet. They're not just trying to terminate their connection and access something at the ISP's POP, right? So, so what happens in those cases is, let me, all right. So now let's say this user has made a PPP connection, but actually the server that this user wants to access is somewhere here on the internet. This is the IP based internet, and this is the server that this user needs to access. This is the user. Okay, so user has successfully established a PPP connection to this ISP using a dial-up modem, for example. But the problem that will happen is that this connection from this ISP to this server is the internet, which is IP based, and this PPP traffic was supposed to be sent over the serial line, over the line that was mainly meant for transmitting voice data, right? But this is actually the internet. This is IP based traffic, so PPP cannot be transmitted over this IP based internet. So what needs to be done here? So this is where PPTP comes into picture, point-to-point tunneling protocol. So PPTP in this case will encapsulate PPP traffic in such a way so that it can be transmitted over this IP-based internet and towards this server. So PPTP will actually will take these PPP frames and it will encapsulate them in TCP packets. So it will add TCP header and trailer and it will send them like TCP packets over the internet. Okay, so that's the job of PPTP, to send PPP traffic over the IP based internet or the IP based network. Okay, so let's take a look at the mind map now. What is PPTP? PPTP is point to point tunneling protocol, and PPP can only be carried over serial links. It cannot be carried over IP based internet. So when a user needs to connect remotely to an office network, his connection from his home to the local ISP might be a dial up serial link, but the connection from local ISP to the office is IP based internet. PPP can be used from home to local ISP, but not any further. To move the PPP frames from local ISP to the internet, PPP needs to be encapsulated into another protocol that can travel over IP based internet, and that job is done by PPTP, which is what I just explained. Okay. So PPTP also needs to have some authentication option, like, right? So just like PPP, it supports PAP, it supports CHAP, it supports EAP, and it also supports an improved version of CHAP, which is MS CHAP version 2. Now, PPP itself does not have any encryption capabilities. So PPTP provides some security, some encryption capabilities as well by using something called MPPE, Microsoft Point-to-Point Encryption, to encrypt PPP payload. Okay. And like I said, PPTP encapsulates PPP in TCP packets. And what port number does it use? It uses TCP port 1723, something that you should remember for the exam purpose as well. All right. Now, there is a limitation that PPTP has a limitation, and that limitation is that it can only work over IP based networks. Okay. So, if I were to go back to the drawing board here, so PPTP is fine if this is an IP based network, which is what the internet is, right? But what if it is not an IP based network? What if it is some private network? For example, it could be ATM, right? Or it could be frame relay, or it could be something like X.25 network. There are many networks which are not IP based. So it could be a non IP based network as well. So what are the options, or what could happen in case of a non IP based network? Because the problem with PPTP is that It can only go over the IP based network. It does not go over ATM or non IP based network like ATM frame relay or X.25. So that is where we have another VPN protocol called L2TP, layer 2 tunneling protocol, which can go over non IP based networks as well. Okay. Now, the difference between PPTP and L2TP is that PPTP encapsulates the PPP packets in TCP, header and footer, but L2TP uses UDP. So L2TP encapsulates PPP in UDP header and footer. So let's go back to the mind map here. It says here PPTP has a limitation that it can only work over IP-based networks. So when PPP packets need to move over non-IP-based networks, such as X.25 frame relay ATM, then PPTP cannot be used. All right. And PPP or PPTP or L2TP, they all work at data link layer. So next comes L2TP. L2TP is layer 2 tunneling protocol. It provides the same functionality as PPTP, but it can work over non-IP based networks too, like X.25 frame relay ATM. And PPT and L2TP does not provide any encryption services. So PPTP did provide encryption service, right? It used MPPE, Microsoft point-to-point encryption, but L2TP does not have its own encryption services. So if you still want to use L2TP, but if you want to have some encryption capabilities as well, then you need to top it up with some other protocol like IPsec, which is called L2TP over IPsec. So in that case, L2TP packets will be encapsulated in IPsec, and IPsec has got very extensive encryption capabilities. All right. Now, when it comes to authentication, L2TP supports Radius and TACX Plus for authentication, which PPTP does not support. PPTP supports EAP, PAP, CHAP, MSCHAP version 2. And L2TP supports L2TP works on UDP, not TCP, and the port number is 1701. So PPTP is TCP 1723, L2TP is UDP 1701. Again, something to remember for the exam, and it works at data link layer. All right.